Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Thursday. This is Seattle Now. Seattle public school teachers and students began heading back to their classrooms this week. In a minute, we'll talk with KUOW education reporter Ann Dornfeld about how it's going so far. But first, let's get you caught up. Say goodbye to the vaccine phases and stages starting April 15th. It's this simple. If you're over 16, you can sign up to get a shot. Governor Inslee announced the change yesterday, partly because of a rising tide of new cases. It expands eligibility to more than 6 million Washingtonians. And you know where I'm going here. Until we get more doses, eligibility doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get one. Here in Seattle, Mayor Jenkins said yesterday that the wait list at city-run vaccination sites is 7 times the weekly supply. Starbucks says it will do a better job of giving its employees an equal shot at advancement. CEO Kevin Johnson outlined the steps they'll take in a letter sent yesterday ahead of an outside review of the company's policies. Johnson also revealed that Starbucks voluntarily resolved a federal workplace discrimination complaint earlier this year. The company's annual civil rights assessment, led by former Attorney General Eric Holder, will be out today. And Amazon is winding down its remote work plans. The tech giant told employees Tuesday it expects to return to an office-centric culture starting this summer, with most people back by fall. It's not clear how many of the company's 60,000 Seattle area office workers could continue working from home in some fashion. Microsoft began bringing some workers back to Redmond this week, but says it plans to keep some of the flexibility gained during the pandemic and move toward a hybrid workplace. It's happening. After more than a year, some of Seattle's kids are returning to the classroom. This week, some special education students are back, and next week, elementary students return for in-person learning. Seattle is one of many districts that have been opening over the last few weeks. But as the largest district in the state, this city has been tackling the logistics of opening schools for thousands of students, while also ensuring a safe workplace for teachers, busing, and hybrid schedules. KUOW education reporter Ann Dornfeld is here to catch us up on how things are going with Seattle's reopening. Hey, Ann, thanks for taking the time.
Hi, Trish. Happy to be here.
So some special ed students are back, and next week things ramp up for elementary students and older special ed students. How's it going so far?
Yeah, and preschool was back this week, too. I spoke to a preschool teacher who said that it was quite a change to rearrange the classroom and kind of reimagine how the day would go for really little kids. But she said that it went well, and just kind of teaching them how to do things differently and trying to get in the habit herself was the trick. But she said overall it was fine. For special education students, I also heard that things went pretty well. I spoke to a father who said that his son, who is 7 years old in first grade, had a good first day back and that other kids seemed really happy to be there. But he said that he's really hopeful that the district is going to come through with its obligation to serve his son and other kids full day instead of just a half day they have right now, if that is what their IEPs have, if their education plan calls for full day of services. Because right now they're only getting some services in person, just basically the kind of academic stuff and the social stuff. But their physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy are still being done online only. And of course, it doesn't always work to do that, or sometimes it doesn't work at all.
Yeah, that sounds like a real challenge for families. And for the district, and this is an enormous task as well. The Seattle Public School District is the largest, and they had to negotiate this with the union, which was no easy task. In the end, what kinds of things did they have to settle on?
Well, originally the district and union had come to kind of like a tentative agreement only on this week's plan. So that was on the preschool and some special education students starting back. And they had to kind of put that in high gear because the governor a couple of weeks ago said that schools needed to reopen at least part-time to elementary students by April 5th and to middle and high school students by April 19th. And virtually none of those plans were fully in play. And UD Hawkins is vice president of Seattle Education Association. That's the teachers union. And she's been leading the bargaining for the union. And she told me yesterday that she had been doing walkthroughs that morning in school buildings and that there were some safety measures that were not yet in place.
There is catch up to do. The governor's timeline has made it extremely difficult to operationalize spaces and make available spaces for 50,000 students. That's real. But it's still unacceptable for any of us to say that something is ready when it is not.
CDC recently, and just in the past week or so, came out with new guidance saying that 3 feet was sufficient between students. And because the union had negotiated a firm 6 feet, that's not going to change. Right now, as they're negotiating high school, that is, something that they can limit it to 3 feet rather than 6 feet. And that would allow them to put a lot more students in each classroom at a time.
And the governor has asked specifically that school districts meet that 3-foot standard by fall. He wants that happening.
Well, I guess the fact that it is a mandate from the governor, it will be easier because it won't be the district suggesting it. It'll be them saying we need to find a way to make this work. Teachers still are supposed to keep 6 feet away from students, so it doesn't really change the teacher's distance. And they also are supposed to keep 6 feet from each other. So with educators vaccinated and the distance changing between students only, there is, that kind of measure of protection, but still cramming twice as many kids in the classroom, especially teenagers who are shown to be better at transmitting the coronavirus. That is, not going to be the most eagerly anticipated reentry this fall for a lot of school staff, I'm sure.
Yeah. What are you hearing from school staff about how they're feeling about returning to the classroom?
I've heard some enthusiasm in Seattle. A lot of folks who are really looking forward to seeing students again, but so many of them say, we wish that we'd just wait for fall for us to be fully vaccinated. A lot of them have just had one of their 2 shots.
Most of our staff aren't fully vaccinated. I can imagine most of our families won't be vaccinated. You have some people who decide not to do it for religious beliefs. We have a huge population of students who more likely won't be vaccinated because of religious beliefs. So what does that look like for the rest of the population?
Bobby Walston is a special education instructional assistant I spoke to at Franklin High School yesterday. He said that he and his colleagues are nervous about returning to the building now and having students start back next week because when they looked at the HVAC inspection reports for the building, they saw that some of the rooms didn't have the proper ventilation or the CO2 levels were too high and that they needed additional HEPA filters, which they said weren't fully set up when they went into the building. And then, of course, there's just a lack of trust in the district by so many educators and staff in the district where they say, okay, we see what's in the contract and that all looks good, but you can't see a virus in the air. You can't tell if it's there or not. And you have to just trust that the HVAC system is working because you don't have some meter on the wall telling you how well air is flowing through a room.
Yeah, I think generalized anxiety is just kind of the rule of the day right now for most people. And, other nearby school districts have opened. How are they doing? And is there anything we can learn from what we're seeing in other districts right now?
The districts that have been phasing school in seem to be doing better. It helps build confidence by staff and families. But an issue with Seattle was that because Seattle was so late to reopen, it now is under this state mandate from the governor to reopen in just a few weeks' time. Another thing that is different in Seattle is a lack of transportation. The district has not had the number of buses or drivers that it needs, and those are provided by an outside contractor for a student who reportedly laid off a ton of drivers in the fall and now has only been able to secure enough drivers to transport the students who are legally required to receive transportation. So those include students facing homelessness and students with disabilities and Head Start students. They're also doing foster students by bus, but they are not promising other students buses for the most part yet. But when I look around at other districts, that is something that they do have is transportation. They have the normal number of buses. And so there has been a lot of concern that that is a very inequitable situation that's going to have a chilling effect on a lot of families' willingness or ability to come back to school.
Yeah, that's something else I wanted to talk to you about. We are nearly at the end of school. How are parents feeling about sending their kids back this late in the year?
I mean, I've heard families say that this is, better than nothing, and they just want this hit of normalcy for their kids because their kids have really been suffering. But I've also heard from, teenagers who say, we don't feel like it's safe to come back. And especially in a lot of BIPOC communities, the danger of the virus feels much more real than to a lot of whiter and wealthier families because they've had relatives become sick or very ill with COVID. They've lost family members. It can feel like a much clearer threat to their well-being and to their family, and they aren't willing to risk it.
Yeah, I hear that. The toll from this virus is so heavy. And do you think this slow reopening will help guide policy for the fall when students need to be back full time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is, an experiment. It definitely is something that will help the district learn how to make things work more smoothly and how to negotiate a new contract going into the fall, and what is a success this spring and what remains to be done to make people feel comfortable and be safe.
Right. And hopefully by September, many, many more people will be vaccinated. Ann Dornfeld.
Absolutely. Here's to that.
KUOW education reporter Ann Dornfeld, thank you.
You're so welcome.
Seattle Now is produced by Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Jenny Cecil Moore produced today's episode. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.